you go ham on the mats and you know it's not sustainable and you're on a collision course. You've heard about our some days Porrada principle.
Ooh.
And a part of that speaks to you, but you're not sure how to implement it. Today, we are going to explain the 5 things you need to do to live the some days Porrada lifestyle.
Yes, indeed. It's pretty important, guys. I mean, that is the thing. Joe's right in saying that we love jiu-jitsu. We go as hard as we can, but you know that you are on a runaway freight train to f***ing disaster. How do we avoid it? How do we stay in the game? How can we get this thing working for us? And step number 1, super important, friends. I mean, we're going to save the best to last, but stay with us for the journey. Step number 1, BJJ. Now, talk to me, Joe. You mentioned this to me, and I thought, oh, that sounds very good. 50% high, 50% low. What does this mean, Joe?
So we're talking about intensity here, and some of you are training 2 days a week. Some of you are training 9 days a week. Essentially, you want to do half of your training sessions at a lower intensity, half at a higher intensity.
But Joe, I like to go hard all the time.
Right? And we all do. And this is the culture. And this is what Porrada is. And this is a beautiful thing. And only jiu-jitsu lets you do that. However, when you go hard day in, day out, every fucking session, 1, it slows down your technical development of jiu-jitsu, as we know. But 2, it exposes you to a greater injury risk than is necessary. And for a lot of people, that is a nail in the coffin, right? Over time, consistently, I go super hard. And it's like, you look at your older training partners and like they're a dying breed, right? Like they reach that point and then they start disappearing.
Yeah.
You know, or even younger ones. Like it's not actually an age thing, but it's usually people can only go hard all the time for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And when you look at the folks who are in the game for a long time, they usually have some kind of, like they reflect kind of what we're getting at today.
Some kind of method around staying training as long and as best as you can. So when you say 50% high, 50% low, what does that actually look like in a week for someone who trains 3, maybe 4 times a week?
Let's go 4 because it's a nice even split, and I'll explain how you do this for 3. But that would mean 2 sessions at low intensity. What would be a low intensity session? That would be avoiding rolls with people that you know light the fire inside you. Right? So I wouldn't train with you on those days. Fair. Right? Be like, yep, no, I'll save that for next week, later in the week. But it also might be changing the nature of your role. So it might be starting in a certain position at every restart. Sure. Right? So I'm just going to do positional stuff today. I'm going to get every opponent to start on my back, and I'm just going to work on my back defense, as we've spoken about in other episodes. But when you do positional sparring, you are closing in the amount of variability in what can happen. And that's a really good opportunity to shine a spotlight on a specific aspect of your game. But it also is a great way to take away a lot of the chaos that can come from freestyle rolling. And so if you just do positional sparring with every training partner in that session, let's say you do 4 rounds at the end of your class, you still get a really hard session. Like, don't get me wrong, you're working. They're still working, but you walk away from that session usually not feeling like you just went to hell and back.
Obliterated.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you got choked a bunch of times because they were starting on you, right?
Sure.
But it's like a controlled chaos.
Yeah.
So that to me would be a low intensity thing. Or another option could be, let's say you are the 52-year-old brown belt and you do the comp class and you love that, but you're like, this like 60 minutes of rolling is getting too intense for me. I would be an advocate, if you are wishing to live the some days Porrada lifestyle and adhere to the 50-50, maybe sit a round out every other round.
Yeah.
Or every 2, do 2 and then rest 1. But it's basically reducing the total intensity of the training in that session.
I think the difficulty of what you're saying, Joe, and you might relate to this, is that when you are not a black belt or you're not a coach or anything like that, your coach is watching. And so the expectation of the coach kind of can weigh on you a little bit, Like, I think we've all felt that way where you're like, oh, coach is watching, like, do that takedown he showed, or coach is watching, don't get swept, like it's so important. Like it's funny how important it is to somehow meet some invisible expectation.
Satisfy the leader.
When your coach is maybe not even giving a shit, they're just kind of glancing across and you're like, oh, the eye of Sauron is on me. Like it's maybe not like that. So I think the difficulty for people with the idea of doing reduced intensities or sitting rounds off, they feel like maybe they're letting the coach down or whatever like that.
I think that's absolutely true. I reckon, and of course, yeah, like it's a bit of a privilege at our stage because we're very confident in how we manage ourselves at training, and
no qualms in being like,
yeah,
I'm not doing this round.
That's right,
and feeling like someone's going to judge us or who gives a shit, right?
Yeah, but so in that regard, if I'm thinking for the newer person that doesn't feel that, it would be about having a conversation with your coach before the session and be like, hey, look, I can really dig in this, but I'm actually going to try and go a couple of days lower intensity. So what I wanted to do is X, and like assuming your coach is like a moderately understanding human, they'll be like, okay, yeah, I can dig that. So just letting them know, because otherwise coach will be like, hey, why are you sitting out?
Sure.
Because they're there, right? They want to make sure you get a good session. And sometimes people do sit out and they need someone to say, hey, you should do this round. Like you look fine. But I think if you've pre-framed it with them, and then it's like everyone knows what's going on, then it's fine.
And what's a high intensity day look like, Joe?
So high intensity is where you can just go balls to the wall. That's where it's like go with the person that lights the fire, like do the hard rounds. You've basically got license there to do whatever you want. Flying leg scissor on every white belt. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, I'm hitting Carney Basamis exclusively to...
Cannot condone. I'm jumping close guard on everyone, regardless of weight class.
Who's the trial guy? Where's the trial guy at? I got to try this new jumping technique. No, I'm only kidding with that. But within the because this is rolling, right? Where it's live training. So go as live as you want.
Yeah, I think just as a side note on that, you can actually go really hard in specific training.
Oh yeah,
like one of the hardest drills that we used to have to do, whether it be at jiu-jitsu in the pro class or even in MMA, when I was training for MMA, was you're on the single leg and the person just has to fight out of the single leg.
Oh yeah.
And you've got to complete.
You finish it.
And you're not allowed to change. Like typically if a single leg's failing, you can switch to different takedowns. But it's like, no, you have to complete on. And they're working your face and just, you're like, oh God. And just 3 minutes of just if they get out or you take them down, you stand back up, you do the same thing.
Yeah.
Dude, just a 3-minute round of that is very tough. So I think if you're out there and you're thinking, man, we only ever get 2 rounds of rolling at my gym. Like that's just the class format. Unless we do open mat or unless we do comp class, I think you can still have a really high intensity class without necessarily having heaps of rounds of rolling. It just depends on like how hard is the specific training.
Yeah, I'd agree. And for sure, anytime you're doing takedown related stuff, that cooks you.
Yeah.
I suppose the sort of side note on this discussion is that like if you train the classic morning class where it's the quick pre-work 1 hour session, maybe there's 2 rounds at the end, and you do that 3 times a week, you might not need to heat any of this. Because you might be like, no, I'll wake up fine. Because you got the whole day to recover and then that night. But I do think for people who train evenings where it is often a longer session, maybe it's 90 minutes, maybe you're doing 30 minutes of rolling, and then you're trying to go straight to bed, waking up the next morning feeling a bit cooked. I think this is a thing really for those folks. Like if you feel like you are on this runaway freight train, as you said, then heed this message. If you're like, no, I feel good, then... As you were, sir.
Yeah, I feel great. You're just ripping the seats out and throwing them in the fire of the train. Like, yeah, I'm on fire, bro. So 50% high, 50% low. Very nice. Number 2, honest self-evaluation. Now, this is very challenging, and we're talking a few different things about knowing where you're at on a given day.
Yeah, I think... if you have a process of journaling, say, as we do, I mean, I don't actually address this in my journaling, but you could have a thing there that's like, how recovered are you today? And we spoke about like a lot of athletes and bodybuilders and whatnot who have used this, right? They would ask themselves in the morning, like, how are you feeling? And it's like, Dorian Yates was famous for it. It was like a certain score out of 5. If it was a 3 or less, he's like, well, that means I'm having a light day today, or I'm doing half sets or whatever. Or if it was a 4 or 5, I'm going balls to the wall.
Yep.
Now, I just think it's important for people to ask themselves that question as they're going into the session. So let's say you're in the car on the way to training, and you're like, oh, how am I actually feeling today? You will usually have a gauge on, I'm actually feeling cooked, like I'm really tired today, or I had a shit sleep, or I went to the gym last night and I feel fatigued, or like I'm feeling pretty good today, you know? And that could be the guide on how you approach the session. So
Now,
you might feel like shit, and you're like, well, today's a low intensity session.
Okay, so what if you, my friend, and me, we're feeling like shit pretty much every day? Does that mean every session is a low intensity session?
Well, I would think yes, but more pertinent would be to then ask, well, what is it that I'm doing that's keeping me showing up feeling like shit all the time? Like, where am I fucking up? And that's like, what's my sleep like? What's my work hour? You know, what am I drinking alcohol before I go to bed? Am I watching TV late? Blah, blah, blah. All the stuff. We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it's like if you chronically feel like shit, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to keep this up for long.
And the honest self-evaluation has to go beyond just how am I feeling now? It's like, what am I doing that is leading me to feel this way?
Yeah, that's right. And I would say for most people, you should be feeling pretty fresh Monday to Wednesday.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you've hopefully got a little bit of rest over the weekend. You've had a slightly longer sleep than maybe you do during the week. Of course, you know, weekend workers, shift workers and stuff excluded from this. But for most folks who are doing the bulk of their work during the week, it's usually once you've accumulated a few days of training that Thursday, Friday, that's where you're going to start to feel a bit more fatigue. So, you know, if you're showing up to a session on a Tuesday night and you're like, I'm cooked, there's a problem.
Yeah.
You know, that should really be kind of peak.
Yeah, you should be feeling pretty good at that time.
Yeah.
And it's understandable. We all get to a point in the week where life and jiu-jitsu has taken a certain amount of energy and we're working with less optimal circumstances. But I mean, even myself, like I had said to Dan, who helped me with my strongman training, he always wanted me to do deadlifts on Friday. I'm like, dude, I've already done 3 sessions. I might have rolled once. Like, I'm on Friday. Like, even though it's good for the team, you know, like everyone, big deadlift vibe. Friday. Like, yeah, everyone gets G'd up and does big deadlifts. I'm like, that's the worst time for me to do deadlifts. I mean, yeah, I can show up and try, but I know that that's wrong for me. And so it's taken me a little while to like just keep chipping away at him. And he's like, all right, well, do your deadlifts on Tuesday. And I'm like, yes. That's what I fucking need, bro.
We'll just play a little video of you deadlifting on the Friday night.
In the corner.
Yeah, everyone feels like you're part of the team.
Involved. No, I do my squats on Friday, which is now acceptable, you know?
Oh, so that's like less taxing than...
Well, no, squatting isn't less taxing. It's just, it's not the priority lift. That's not the thing I'm trying to get better at.
Right.
The thing that I have to push and really drive myself with is my deadlifts right now. So because that's a focus, I bring that in earlier in the week.
Smart.
And this could be relate to your jiu-jitsu. Say comp classes on Friday night. This is a very common thing.
Is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, depending on what gym you go to,
Yeah.
but I've been to a number of gyms where they're like, yeah, we have like a real barn burner of like rounds on a Friday night. You're like, okay, I guess.
Know, guys.
Yeah. I feel that really with any athlete that I work with, or it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not, anyone who I'm giving advice to about training, I always say, try to have your heaviest jiu-jitsu session and your hardest rolling somehow in the first half of the week.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of moderate it from there.
And I mean, I think a lot of people like to really light shit up on a Saturday mid-morning open mat.
Sure.
And that's great, you know, because you usually got the rest of the day and the next
Sunday.
day. Yeah. But I mean, I feel that, right? Yeah, you wake up on a Saturday, even when you're going to train at 10:30,
Yeah.
you're kind of sluggish.
Yeah.
Like you've usually woken up a bit later. Anyway, you know, not to get caught up on that.
All to the side, but
yeah.
The honest self-evaluation, you shouldn't, even though I think jiu-jitsu teaches us a lot about toughness and just continuing on, having an honest stop and think to yourself before you walk into training, like, where am I at today? Just taking that little bit of time allows you to train more appropriately.
Yeah, and that actually raises a good point, which is that like a lot of people will be hearing this and be like, fuck that, like that sounds weak as. And yes, that's what I would have thought too when I was 26 and a blue belt. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's just like, nah, I'm getting after it. But the reality is most people get forced out of the game after a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is, while this might in the moment be, you might see it as taking something away from your enjoyment of jiu-jitsu, it's actually giving you this entire longer lifespan in the game, which is way more than just, oh, I go hard every night.
Well, I think this is also another thing which I mentioned it before, which is a really good lesson I got from my old Russian coach at FIM. Shout out. There's a difference between training and testing. And look, training is the process of some days are a bit easier, some days are a bit harder, but you're working it towards the ultimate goal of getting better. And your test might be a competition, or your test might be grading, or whatever it is. But the testing comes later. Because if you test right now, what you know is you're not as fit, or you're not as strong, or you're not as good at jiu-jitsu as you want to be. Therefore, you must endure these ups and downs of training in a sustained way to get better, to then test better where, improved performance. So I think the problem is, and don't get me wrong, I'm the kind of person who loves to and send everything. I know absolutely in my gut on a very deep level that is not how you get better, even though I crave the excitement of it.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty, I think, the juggle. Now, number 3. Now, this is something, it's interesting because it's something Joe's mentioned before, and I haven't adhered to this at all, which is the selective with your roles. It's like a selfish self-preservation. Can you speak on this, Joe?
Yeah, so the prevailing culture in jiu-jitsu is that you are just obliged to roll with whoever, right?
IDGFA, bro, I'll fight King Kong.
Yeah, and it's like whoever makes eye contact first and says, you want to roll, man? and like that's great, and you need to be kind of, you need to be a part of that. But there is a point where you need to be selfish about who you roll with. Now, when I say selfish, I don't mean that you should completely disregard rolling with the person who's doing a trial class, or perhaps rolling with a teammate that is 40 kilos lighter than you that you could just crush, if you want it. Because you have an obligation as a teammate to contribute to other people's training, right? But I'm talking more about being selective with the people that could be problematic for you. And so again, kind of to the first point, when there's that person that really riles you up, that sort of pulls you, it just always turns into chaos. And maybe it gets emotional when you roll with them. Maybe you see red and bodies hit the floor, and then you wake up and you just got choked out. But when it's that person, you're like, oh, it's low intensity day, not today.
Yeah.
And I always found like those people usually feel the same about you. And there's often, and we've spoken about this, like you often will have that kind of, you'll both acknowledge your ignorance of one another this evening.
Right.
Like you'll kind of see each other and then you're both separate ends of the room.
Not choose to roll with each other.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, that thing that happens in the, in the plains in Africa, like Serengeti and whatnot, you see it in the nature docos. I've never been there. But where like, there'll be like a herd of zebras, and then there'll be, some lions, and the lions will be like threatening the zebras, and the zebras will do like, I don't know if it's zebras that do this or like antelopes or some shit, but they'll do some kind of like funny postural little dance thing. And what it is it's basically sending a message to the lions that like, hey, I'm pretty fit, I'm feeling pretty springy. If you want to try and cover that 150 meter distance, I'm probably going to get away. So it's not even worth trying.
Yeah. And
the lions are like, yeah, no, let's go get someone else. And it's like, we both agreed to settle, like to not go into the fire. In any case, I think that's really important. And so to do that, you have to be okay with being a bit selfish.
Yeah. When I first started training BJJ, I had an unfair advantage because I was a trainer. I went to the gym, I knew what to do, but I didn't actually have a good place to record it. I'd write it down, I'd lose the journal, I'd lose my progress. The fantastic thing about the Bulletproof for BJJ app is not only does it show you what to do, it gives you a unique way to record your progress and stay on track. Now, the other thing which is awesome is you can connect with myself and Joey in the app. We've got a great group where you can ask questions and get them answered to help you being guided on your journey in the gym. Go to the App Store or the Play Store, search Bulletproof for BJJ, and download it today to get your 14-day free trial, money back guaranteed. You don't like it, we'll refund you. So, download the app today and we'll see you in there. And it also takes like a little bit of courage in yourself to turn someone down if they call you to roll and you know that it's kind of like your gym nemesis or it's a hard roll. And it because no one wants to feel like a coward, or no one wants to feel like they didn't rise to the challenge, or whatever it is, right? Like, we all have a degree of ego or pride regardless. Like, I know there's been moments, Ben Hodgkinson and I have had so many wars, right? And when we were at South Yarra Gym, when it was Absolute South Yarra before it became St Kilda, he was just like my main training partner. It was like him and Craig, Lockie, and a couple of other guys. But we'd always end up together. And there was definite times where he didn't want to roll with me because he would just avoid my guy. I'd walk over to him. He's sitting on the wall, and I would go to be like, "Oh, you want to roll?" He just would not look me in the face, right? And there was definite times where he would be like looking for me, and I'm just like,
Giraffing you from the other side of the
I just
room.
go, hey, Zach, amen. Do you want to roll? Like, just
Who's Zach Amen?
Zach was the commentator on the CJI trials. He called him the CGI trial.
Oh, wow.
He's a wild man. Anyway, I shout out Zach. He's a funny guy, but he's a smaller, not as frightening human as Hodge. And there were also times where you're talking, we would both look the other way.
Yeah.
Because we both, either for injury reasons or energy reasons, it just wasn't the time.
Yeah.
But then there was also times when we both lock in and be like, "You want to roll, mate? Sure. Sounds great.
I've been waiting for you to come by.
Go, bro."
Yeah.
And those are the high intensity days.
Yeah. And that's the, I think it's totally fine to openly acknowledge that with someone and be like, "Brother, not today. I can't go into the fire with you today." And people take that as, he didn't want to roll me because I'm a tough roll. And so that's great. It's
respectful, actually.
It's respectful, and you're not sending the wrong message, right? I do also, I've encountered people over the years who are just kind of injury machines.
Oh my God,
And usually with them, I don't feel the need to explain anything. I'm just like, no thanks.
No.
No, I'm good. I'm going to rest this one. I'm going to go so-and-so. And of course, when you're brand new, you're probably not going to feel confident to say that, and you're not going to know the lay of the land. You don't know who these people are. But your job is to get the read on the different characters in your team and start to make those you have those little invisible labels where you're like, okay, not that guy.
Injury machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a guy, Arno, for anyone who used to train at CBD, they know who this guy is. Arno always had knee braces, wrist. He was always strapped up. He looked the most injured out of everyone, right? But he actually was the injury machine. He would spend 10 minutes telling you, "Oh man, my wrist's bad, my knee, my neck." And you're like, so it puts you in this mindset of like, "Oh man, really?
Right.
I'm sorry." Yeah. So you don't roll hard.
Let's start chill.
And then you just bam, bro. And you're like, "Oh God, Arno, this guy."
Oh, no.
Oh no. So, man, fuck that guy. Shout out. Fuck you, Arno, if you ever see this, you prick. No, he was just, he was really into hurting people.
Yeah, right.
He was really there for it. But
Nano went on to create a brand called Anaconda.
Highly successful. He probably did. So let's go to number four. Number four, injury is part of the game. And this is something which we are not accepting. No, not me. It'll never happen to me. Talk to us about this, Joe.
Yeah, so acceptance is the key thing here, and it's injury, but it's also time off, and that there are going to be things that happen in your life or within jiu-jitsu that force you to take time off training. It might be I don't know, the birth of your child, and your wife needs extra help around the house, and
sure,
or your husband needs extra, whatever the it is, right?
A significant life happening.
Yeah, something goes on and you can't train, and understanding that, because it's often when you try and force it during those periods where you can fuck yourself up.
For sure.
And particularly if injury occurs, right? And you're like, oh, I took a couple of days off and then got back in. It's like, no, you came back too early. I think if you can accept that it's going to happen and that if you're going to do this thing for 10 years, 20 years, there will be so many times in your life that you will be off the mats for whatever reason. If you can be okay with that and just manage yourself well off the mats and let that time play out for whatever it needs to, that's going to keep you in good stead then to stay on the path.
Yeah.
But if you're always trying to force your way back in under unideal circumstances and then getting hurt again or pissing off your partner, you know, or whatever the fuck, or ruining the holiday because I thought it was just us, but you've gone to visit the fucking Ralph Gracie Academy down the road, you know, like,
hey, babe, I've got this really nice getaway for us.
Yeah.
We're going to Byron Bay.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, the Meow brothers are having a seminar at the academy.
I booked in 2 privates with Tallis. And,
if you could just record for us, if you could just get that footage of our private lesson.
I'm going to need you to mix the acai for when I get back to the cabana. But yeah, so, you know, like there's an immaturity in not accepting the time off. Yeah, and you pay a price for that.
I actually had done something similar, actually with Taekwondo. I pretty much completely torn my MCL and I had to have a leg brace, I had crutches. Physio said, if you do this wrong, you're going to have knee surgery. Like you're going to have it reattached. But right now it's hanging on by a thread. So I did what I thought was right in terms of that. And I did I got fucking impatient. I was actually doing my fucking head in because I'd gone from training twice a day, at gym, everything, just wanting to be the best, to now I can't walk. The impatience wasn't actually going back to Taekwondo early. It was that I tried to do something else because I was going a bit stir crazy. And I decided I was just going to play a bit of pickup basketball. Of course, because it's not that demanding. I just got out the brace. And I was like, oh, it's not sore. It's kind of felt a bit wobbly, like almost a little bit unstable. But I was like, I'm just jogging around, you know. Mate, went up for a rebound, came down, stood on someone's foot and like rolled my knee in and felt like and I was like, oh, no, why? And then I went back and the physio's like, what have you done? Like you've gone 3 months and you're kind of back to square one. And I will always remember that because it took me that same bullshit of the leg brace, the crutches, another 3 months. Again. And that is, you can't get that time back. And that was just, like you say, it's kind of immature because I just refused to accept that I'm not there yet.
Yeah, that's got to hurt.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, and you hopefully make that mistake once.
No. Well, I did it to myself, right?
Yeah.
It's the way I got no one else to blame. It was on me, but it was a tough lesson to learn. And so this is where we get to something which is something you've probably never heard of or you're not thinking about with your jiu-jitsu, which is, I think, one of the most important things in terms of the some days Porrada, which is life load management. Let's talk about this, Joe, because this is something that's not talked about in jiu-jitsu. Yeah,
so you have a bunch of different roles in your life and you could look at these different roles. Let's say you have your career, you have your family, you know, whatever, like home life, maybe you've got a role to play with your parents or your siblings or something like that. You know, maybe you work at a soup kitchen and that's a thing, but you have these competing obligations, right? These things are competing for your time and energy, and you only have so much time and energy in a given week. And so there is an organic balance of sorts when everything's kind of floating along at a pretty even keel. But as soon as something gets busier, let's say work asks you to cover a couple of extra shifts this week, or let's say you have a newborn now in the house, or let's say your car breaks down, right? Whatever it is, maybe you got a holiday coming up or it's a long weekend or some shit. All of a sudden, it's going to throw the other things out of balance. And we all feel this, right? It's like we just had a run of public holidays here in Sydney, or in Australia, and it actually fucks you up.
It throws the rhythm of life out.
Yeah, because you got like these 2 short weeks and, you know, you kind of take a little bit of time off and then you're like, well, I've actually got extra work to do, but in less time. So yeah, your routine's sort of out of whack. But the point here is that when other things happen outside of the mats, they're going to affect your ability to be on the mats.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that like we've spoken about, people like it's really good to just try and keep your routine. Like that's an important discipline to have, but you also have to be aware when something starts competing harder for your time and energy, you have to make allowances for that.
Definitely. Yeah, and here's something like, so I got this from Paul Chek, actually. It talks about physiological load, that someone coming to you, if you're a trainer and you're looking at them, when you ask them more detailed questions about like the stress on their bodies, they may already be carrying 50 kilos of physiological load before you put the bar on their back. So even though they tell you, hey, I can squat 100 kilos, because of the amount of time they spend sitting down, the physical work they did on the weekend, all this stuff, that you could put 50 kilos on their back and that's going to feel like 100 kilos because of all these other factors. And we all know it, right? Like it doesn't matter if it's tax time, Christmas, something where your life outside of jiu-jitsu is loading you up with stress. You got a presentation for the boss. You've got to manage staff because you got promoted to manager. Whatever the bloody hell it is, you're like, I feel shit when I get to jiu-jitsu. Like, I just can't. Why am I not? What's wrong with me when I go to jiu-jitsu? And it's because we can acknowledge that there's busyness and stress and stuff in life, but we somehow forget that that can impact our jiu-jitsu. And we expect that every time we go, we're going to be better or find a way to improve. And yeah, in ways you could improve technically, but if you're exhausted because you've been up all night with a crying baby, it will be hard for you to learn the lesson and it will be hard for you to perform. So you do have to factor in these other parts as really having a positive or negative effect on your jiu-jitsu. Because that's the thing, when you've got less on, you can obviously sleep better, train more, all this stuff. But when you've got more on, it's got to be considered as part of the things.
That's right. And I think that, you know, most folks could probably like vibe with when things get busier in life, probably their jiu-jitsu tends to drop off a bit, right? It's often, our training is often one of the first things on the chopping block that we do sort of subconsciously. And so that is, you know, life has a way of maintaining a balance there. But it's often during those times when you try to force it that you can run into a bad situation. Here's an example. Let's say you have, let's say you've picked up an extra couple of shifts at work. It's a really busy work week and you're like, no, I'm still going to get to the gym. But you find that you're kind of hustling all week. You're rushing, you're jumping in the car, trying to fly to training, blah, blah. You're running a little bit late, you get there 5 minutes late. You skip the normal warm up that you typically do. You jump into the session. Like, okay, maybe it's fine once, maybe it's fine twice, but if this is something that you're doing chronically, you're not sleeping particularly well, your meal timings are also out a bit this week because you're fucking hectic and you didn't have time to prep on the weekend, all of a sudden you've now got like 8 or 10 or fucking 50 contributing sort of factors that are making it, you're in a more injurious environment
it's
now.
Hanging above you like a boulder.
That's right.
It's going to fucking smash you.
And so it's like, whatever, short term, usually not a big deal, but for some of us, this is the nature of life, right? Like it's up and down in terms of the obligations that we have and the time and stuff. So if you find that you're always grinding in that way and like pushing and just sort of hanging on by a thread, maybe heeding that message and just going, all right, well, I'm going to apply a similar kind of up and down or like peaks and troughs to my training approach.
Yeah, and the big challenge here is actually tracking it, like keeping track of it in the same way you might have a calendar, Google Calendar, whatever. You know, you put your meetings in there or you put your jobs in there that you're trying to manage for your business. Factor in that things often cost you a bit more than you expect, whatever that is. Like even having family over, you've got family around for the holidays or for some special event. I love my family. They're great. But I do find after a certain amount of time spent with them, it goes from being like rewarding to being stressful. And that takes a toll on your energy. And running around and doing things on behalf of others, even though it feels good because you're helping people, that can leave you with a lower charge. So therefore, for you to expect that you can walk into jiu-jitsu and perform the same is kind of unrealistic.
Yeah.
So that's the 5 things, folks.
That's the Some Days Porrada. I really wanted to stretch it out to a 12 rules for life, Some Days Porrada kind of thing. But
the book will be available on Amazon at the end of the year.
You bet. But I did want to just close on that point that it is not about not being savage. It's not about not going hard. It's not about avoiding the challenge, because these are all the things that jiu-jitsu allows us to do, which make it special and make it a very powerful game to play, or fucking hobby to have, or sport to pursue. But it is about understanding that takes a toll, and that if you don't manage that intelligently, you probably won't be able to do it for long. So we want to see all you guys be able to train for as long as you want. And then when the day comes where you decide, I'm going to stop training now, it's a voluntary choice, not an involuntary something that's forced upon you.
There it is.
There it is. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
Tell
folks.
a friend.
Woo.